Okay, I'll call to order the regular session, the regular meeting of the Haywood County Board of Commissioners for September 16th, 2019. Our first order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance, and after that, I'm going to ask our good chaplain, the Reverend Womack, to come forward for our invocation. So if everyone would please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, we praise your name. Thank you for this free country and the flag to which we can pledge allegiance. As we ask your blessing on this meeting, that these our commissioners may have all that's necessary to decide matters that are before them. Please, as we implore you often, give them wisdom and discernment in their conversations and in the making of decisions. Give them courage where necessary to act boldly, but give them perseverance also to listen and to react in those times that are more mundane. That, Father, the result may be your will, and that all may be for your glory. Indeed, we pray in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, thank you, Reverend Womack. Our next order of business is the public hearings, but there are none, or a call, there are none tonight. Our next order of business will be a public comment session. If you'd like to comment, you have 3 minutes. And there's a, when the red light comes on, your 3 minutes is up. A yellow light, you got a few seconds left. So if anyone would like to address the board, they can address the board on any subject that they want to. And so at this time, does anyone want to address the board at this time? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public comment session. Our next order of business is constituent concerns, and let's see. I'll start. Tommy, you want to start us?
I had a couple, but I think they got addressed. The county staff handled a couple of issues I had, and helped some citizens out that had a problem. So appreciate Greg West. He was the guy that I had to go to for it. It's a couple of questions about taxes and tax bill.
Okay.
Appreciate that. I know the residents appreciate that too, Greg.
Okay. Brandon?
Same thing. I had a couple of constituent concerns, and I've addressed them already. So.
Okay. Curtin?
Yes, I've got a couple. One on the cell tower tonight, and I think that Case Brown sent an email to me and also to the county manager and Frank Queen. And I hope you can address that, Frank, when we're discussing that item on the agenda. The other thing is I had a lady call me this week, and I think called the sheriff as well, in regards to she lives in the municipality and she lives right next to county property, and of course you got firing of guns for about an hour and a half and next to that, and our ordinance doesn't really speak to that. I mean, as long as it says you can just shoot all you want to within the county, and I don't know if it has any indication as to dwellings, but I'm not saying we need to make a change, but it may be something that we need to just look at to see how close to a dwelling you can be while shooting your firearm, another person's dwelling.
Okay. Do you want Frank to address that when we get to number 4? Or do it now? Or the application for the...
Oh, when we get to number 4.
Okay.
If he could address that when we get to number 4, but not the gun thing. I thought you were talking about the gun thing. No, but it's just something I wanted to bring up. You said constituent concerns. Normally I don't have too many, but I had a few this week.
Okay, that's good. Do you have any more?
Nothing to speak of.
Okay. All right. I don't either, so thank y'all. Okay, is there any discussion or adjustment to the agenda? Anybody? Okay. We okay, Candy? Okay, Candy says we're good. That's good. Okay, the next order of business will be our consent agenda.
Hey, back up.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Skipped one. Our next order of business is administrative agency reports presentations, and it'll be the Recycle Right North Carolina presentation. We have our program administrator, David Francis, and our recycling coordinator, Zandra Kirkendall. And sorry I missed you guys. And I also want to give a shout out to Zandra for, she did a booth at Elk Fest this weekend, and she did a display. We appreciate that, and I understand you talked to lots of folks. So I know you spent your weekend doing that, and we thank you. And I'm sure people are able to get educated on exactly what they can recycle. So go ahead, Dave, and you go.
Thank you.
Present.
We're here to talk about Recycle Right in North Carolina. You may have heard that recycling's in a little bit of trouble. A lot of rumors are swirling around about recycling. Back in 2018, China stopped accepting our lower class recyclables, which then threw the domestic market into turmoil. Since then, we've had to regroup as recyclers and come up with a better way of recycling. And the efforts of those are, you'll see when Zandra presents, is Recycle Right North Carolina. So what happened is those lower class, sorry, the lower class,
real good.
Even still now? Lower classes of materials and contamination was coming through the material recovery facilities, or MRFs. And so what this contamination did was it caused those recyclables to be turned into landfill, trash, or garbage, and had to come back to the landfill. So that's where you hear a lot of those rumors, is because of the contamination. One of the things that we started back in 2014 was single stream, where you put everything in a bin, and put your cardboard, your plastic, your bottles all in one bin. That helps with higher participation, but sometimes that gets confusing to our citizens who think this can go in there, this is trash, or this not. But what is the big contamination is plastic bags. The little plastic bags that you get from the grocery store are one of our largest contaminants, because when they get into the recycling in the MRF facilities, they jam up the machines. So one of the things that we started a couple years ago was a bin, where we used more bins and we to help get all that in there without using a plastic bag. I forgot the plastic bag. I'll have to go back and get it. So this next year, we're going to show you the plastic bag that we're going to help the rural residents. As we've done in 2016, we helped Maggie Valley acquire carts, and for 2019, we helped the town of Canton and the town of Clyde get carts as well. And on Friday, we started working with the town of Waynesville to get recycling carts there as well. So when we eliminate more plastic bags, the cleaner our recyclables will be and the less contamination that we'll have. So Haywood County in the state of North Carolina is actively working to improve the outcomes on both sides of the bin, promoting and better messaging for the participants, so they'll know what can go into those bins and get clear, better understanding. Because one of the things that happened when we had privatized, we sort of stepped back from recycling and working with their citizens, and we now know that that's an important facet that we've always got to continue that educational component to this to make it more successful. So this past year, we tinkered with Zandra's job description, who's been with the Solid Waste Department for over 10 years, to make her a recycling coordinator for Haywood County. And as the chairman said, she was out at Elk Fest this Saturday, and she's also with the Haywood County Fair back at the end of August, and has got several outreach groups, and we're going to be back into the school system this year as well, too, with different activities. And we're moving forward and trying to make a recycling as robust as it once was. We've been sort of on an up and down roller coaster with our weights up to here as things shift in the market, because we had this great recycling program with rigid plastics. We're very happy that we were one of the first counties that got on the forefront of that. Those rigid plastics are the plastic tubs, and the kiddie pools. And the other thing that I always liked was the pink flamingos, that kind of rigid plastic. And all that market went away. The entire market went away in 2018 when China did that. So now we're having to develop new markets, work with the end processors. So Haywood County, we don't recycle all of our material here at the MRF and Clyde. We have an end processor over in North Buncombe called Kirby. So our blue bags, our steel, our metal, and our containers go there. We have different diversions for have the recycling cardboard go somewhere else, and metal goes to another place. And so you develop those markets over time. And Zandra did a very good job of developing those markets when she was there at Solid Waste full time. So it was a natural fit for her to get back in there and get back on the horse of getting our recyclables and getting our numbers back where they should be. So I'm proud that Zandra is here, and that she's done a great job. I've thrown a lot at her over the last 3 months, and she's done a fantastic job, and I think you'll see from the presentation how our dedication is to this. Thank you.
I got my thing. Hello, Commissioners. So today we're going to talk about a statewide initiative called Recycle Right in C. The state actually started working on this approximately 1 year ago. It is statewide. Every county that has recycling has what they call a MRF shed, which is where their MRF, all their materials go to their MRF. Our MRF happens to be curbside management in Asheville. And what we're doing is we are taking our single stream materials and we are trying to reduce the contamination that's going in that stream because it is confusing when we say single stream. People go, oh, we're just going to put it all in there. We're going to send it somewhere. Somebody else is going to take care of it. And that's really not what happens. We used to have, like David said, a very robust mixed rigid plastic collection. And because of the markets, that did go away. So what we're seeing right now is we're getting a lot of contamination from that that's going into Kirby, and Kirby is actually having to process that out and then turn around and send it back to us. And those fees are being put back to the county as an extra haul cost and an extra disposal fee at the landfill. So what we're trying to do, we're showing that in January of 2018, China banned the imports of the mixed papers and the plastics. And then in 2018, they put a cap on how much contamination we could actually put in that load that they take. And it's half of 1%. So, you know, that's really not a whole lot when you're looking at a transportation standpoint. So we don't have the end markets domestically. So we're working on just making sure that what's going in the bin is the stuff that we can actually in process and get out to these recycling companies. Because right now, our bins contain way too much trash. We're getting food waste, we're getting the plastic bags, and it's confusing people because we do have the conflicting messages. When we ran our own facility, we sorted in Clyde, and we could pretty much pull out what we wanted and ended up, you know, having to throw away what we couldn't use. But now that we're having to ship that material to Asheville, we really want to reduce how much trash we do send there. So this education campaign, like I said, it's been in the works with the state for about a year, and they are working actually with the domestic markets and all of the MRFs in the state to get everybody on the same page. And on the picture on the left-hand side, is there a little red button? A little red button? No? Picture on the left-hand side is actually a MRF that is in what they call downtime. Too much contamination is getting in their equipment. They're having to stop the process, go in there, which is dangerous because it's rolling equipment, and cut all that material out. That's what happens when the plastic gets in there. That's a good amount of plastic for a day's work. You know, when you're having to stop production an hour or two every day, that's a lot of downtime. The picture on the right upper is actually a load of materials that came into our facility prior to us privatizing. People said single stream, they threw everything in there together. We got a load of construction debris that was mixed in with recyclables. There's like, oh, well, we'll just give it to them. Y'all can sort it out. That whole load had to go to the landfill because there's no way for our personnel to pull that material out. And then on the bottom is just an example, all the different film plastics and different plastics that there's a recycling symbol on it, but our processor can't take it because that's what's contaminating that machine. So that's what that bottom picture is. So again, single stream, that's where we're just putting everything in one bin. We want to make it easy. Instead of having to put your bottles over here and your paper over here and your cardboard over here, you can go to one place, dump it, be done with it. And collection is expensive. Recycling is not free. It's never really been free. It's just been built into the cost of collections. We're seeing an increase in that cost based on the domestic markets just not being there. And some rules that we've got, we're going to put all of our bottles, cans, tubs, jugs, jars, paper, and cardboard go into that bin. They don't want any cups. They don't want any film plastic, none of that kind of stuff. And then they have the issue with the tanglers, which are people think, oh, we're going to put that rubber hose in there because it's plastic. Well, it's not really plastic. And that gets caught in the machinery as well. So we're trying to get the word out. Don't put that information or that material in that bin. And then styrofoam is totally something, it's got a symbol, never been able to recycle that around here. And the word that they're trying to get out is, when in doubt, throw it out. If it's not a butter tub, dairy tub, bottle jug jar, they don't want it in the process. So, and like David mentioned earlier, back in 2016, we applied for a state cart grant and was able to supply recycling carts for the town of Maggie Valley. We are currently in process of getting Canton and Clyde their carts. Contract was just approved last week. Was it last week? Yeah. And then right now, town of Waynesville is still using their blue bags, but as David mentioned, we are going to start negotiating with them on getting them some carts as well. Our convenience centers, since we started the single stream, we have always pushed getting everything in that bin loose. So instead of using a bag, you can use cardboard box, a laundry basket, something that you can reuse over and over again. David, you want to show them that bag?
So this is one of the totes that we want to begin using. There's a lot of the rural citizens don't have to pick up, but they're bringing everything that people use. So these bags, reusable bags, you wash them. So on one side, it's not put in recycling. And on the other side, it shows you what to do.
Show them the handle.
Let's go. So this way, we'll help the residents, like I said, we have the bins that came out, will be passed out several times. Those getting in and out of the carts are hard. This hopefully will make it a lot easier.
Okay, so, and I gave y'all handouts, what's on the screen here. Curbside management, on the left-hand side, we have what is called an approved item list. The state sat down with curbside management at length and got a list of exactly what he wants in that bin. The items in blue, which are your plastics, your metals, your glass, and your paper, those are the items that he's really looking forward to getting. Again, don't bag it. Give it a quick rinse. It doesn't have to be spick and span clean. And just put those items in there. The stuff in the red on the Know Your Nose is a list of the most common items that they end up getting in their MRF, causing issues, and then having to return to us. The biggest one, of course, being the plastic bags. Shredded paper is another problem with their equipment because it actually, when it gets loose, his screen is a 2-inch by 2-inch screen, so anything that's that small is going to fall into his glass collection, and that's going to contaminate his glass. So we're trying to keep anything small out of his glass to help with that end market. They've got on there the coffee cup styrofoam, dishes, any household hazardous waste. We're trying to keep that out. We still do have a lot of people that don't understand that we do have battery collection, but it cannot go in your bin. It has to be done separately. And then there's a flyer on the tanglers. Make sure it's clean. Like I said, it doesn't have to be spick and span. They just want it rinsed out so that when it sits on the floor, they're not attracting vector rats or bugs or anything like that before it's processed. And then on the right-hand side is an example of a CartSmart tag that we will be working with the state to customize for Haywood County once we get the carts for Canton and Clyde. There will be a collaboration between the county, the state, Canton, Clyde, and Southeastern Recycling Commission, as they have also committed money to the two towns for them to get their carts to help with that offset of that cart. So that's kind of an example of what we're looking for to get the word out. And recycling helps support our jobs. We've got 16,300 private sector jobs In the state, there are 674 businesses. And North Carolina statistics, 1.5 million tons of materials were recycled in North Carolina last year. And we can get those numbers up if we can get the contamination down. And if y'all have any questions.
Go ahead.
I'd like to say, Zonder, we appreciate what you do. You came to our Commission for a Clean County Committee meeting there a couple of weeks ago. And I'm also on the Landfill Oversight Committee, and I can say that this is big money. I mean, you get on the front end, and then what people doesn't realize, it saves cubic feet in our landfill. So it extends the life of our landfill, and it's been good stewards with the recyclables on the front end. So this pays dividends on down the road that we may never live to see. But,
Correct.
you know, it's just being good, and I appreciate the heart you have for this. I picked up on that when you came visit our meeting here a few weeks ago. So.
I'll be at the next one, too.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment. When Michael Sarles and I went to Lawrence, Kansas to look at the Stadler recycling equipment when we were considering doing that. And in Lawrence, Kansas is where Kansas Universities, or University of Kansas, the Jayhawks, they always have a good basketball team. But anyway, it's a college town, and so they recycle in carts. Right. Of course, they have curbside pickup. Of course, that's in the town. But we went to the plant, and what was interesting was when they came in, they brought the trucks in and they dumped it out, and it's like I described it as like a bunch of leaves, if you will. It was really clean. Yeah. And you know, some people were, you know, they were trying to say that what we were trying to do, it smelled and everything, but really it didn't, because recyclables, other than milk jugs probably,
right,
is probably the only odor you have. So that's another good indication that if your recyclables should be fairly light, and they should be fair. I do a 55-gallon can, and I bring it in a bag. So I think now what I'm going to do is just take the bag out. Instead of throwing the bag in, I'll just open the bag and dump it in there.
Right, and
So
that's the message they're trying to get out. And
yeah.
I'll be making rounds to the convenience centers and seeing how their setup is. I've visited Chatham County, and they actually had a can beside their recyclables for those bags if people didn't want to reuse that bag. But again, if we can get away from that plastic bag and get to the reusable bag, that would help eliminate that.
I'll just use it over
as
and
well.
over is what I'll
Yeah.
do, because that's, you know, that way I don't have to,
Right.
you know, those, you buy a box of them, they're like $20. So,
Right.
you know, your plastic bags are pretty expensive. So this is really good that we're doing that. And so I guess I missed it. Where do you get those green bags? I don't know that I'd use one. It's really too small for what I recycle.
Well, there are actually several companies. This company is a promo company that I actually networked with at one of the recycling conferences I went to. But there are several companies.
So we're not going to make them available. You're just saying this is.
We would love
will.
to make them available.
They'll be available by November 15th when America Recycles Day. We'll have them available for that day.
Yeah, if we can
This
get
is a
them.
10-week program.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we giving them away, or do they cost? So do you get them at the convenience centers?
Yeah, we'll have a distribution. We'll update the commissioners when
Okay.
we figure out the best way.
Okay, because I think a lot
Yeah.
of people will do that.
Right.
I mean, if you know, well, anyway,
Yeah.
if you're one or two people, you could probably use that, and maybe if you go by, you know, every few days and stuff. I usually go
Right.
about every 2 weeks, so I get a pretty good amount.
Which is a good thing, because like I said, the carts that we're getting are actually 65-gallon carts for the towns. So that's a pretty good sized cart to be set
Yeah.
out on a weekly basis. So, you know, if somebody's going, depending on how often they recycle, I'd use that in a day.
Yeah, and
So-
I can tell you, I started, you know, really seriously recycling several years ago, but I fill up a 55-gallon can with a bag every 2 weeks.
Yep.
And during those 2 weeks, I take two 13-gallon bags to the landfill. So
Right.
that's trash. So that's
Right.
2 to 1,
Right.
or what that is. So,
Yeah.
you know, we can do that. We can do this and really, you know, keep, like Tommy said, we can keep keep our landfill down and our
Yeah.
footprint down, which is a great thing.
And we actually looked at different sizes of bags. This is just one example that they had. They had smaller ones. They actually do custom sizing, so if we
Right.
wanted to go a little bit bigger, we
Well,
could
I
go a
might-
little
I
bit
might
bigger.
check on that.
It's just all depending on, what kind of budget we have available
Okay.
for the quantity that we need to
Right.
order. Because
Well, I
they,
wouldn't mind Googling it and just buying one for my own if I can get a bigger one and stuff.
I believe
so.
I have maybe a few.
How big's that? How many gallons?
That one, I believe, was a 12 to 13
Oh,
gallon.
okay, okay.
The one that I brought to David was right around a 10 to 12 gallon
Okay.
bag. Yeah,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
so,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, they had some that were, kind of looked like the grocery store bags. They had some that were
Right.
more square, just depends on, they will custom size depending on what you really
Right.
want. This one, did that come from Georgia?
Yeah, if you the recyclables are pretty light, because that 55-gallon bag, it's usually not that hard
Right.
for me to
And-
carry.
And if when you're done with your bottle, if you want to scrush it and put the lid back on, you'll get more in there because
Yeah,
they
that's true.
they don't need it to be perfectly shaped because it's going to get crushed anyway.
Right.
So that would help you get more in the bag.
Just a note, or a comment, I guess, is I did see in there, I think we went over it pretty quick, but if you're ever in doubt, throw it out, is
When in
what you
doubt,
said.
throw it out. That's the catch line that the state has decided with their MRFs in order to keep that contamination out. If you're not sure, just leave it out.
I know
Or call.
I go to the convenience centers quite often, and I always see people there when I go that's asking. I guess the first step would be to ask, where it needs to go, and then if you're ever in doubt,
Yeah.
throw it out, because that is, like you said, it's going to cost us, because
It's gonna cost us
It's going to go
twice.
over, and we're going to pay for it again when it comes back, so we're paying for that two ways.
Right.
So I guess I just wanted to be sure everybody understood to pay attention to that, so.
Those aerosol cans, you can't, right?
Curbside will take steel aerosol cans if they're empty. They don't advertise that because they're getting too much aluminum. And
Okay.
he does not have an outlet for the aluminum. So they did remove the aerosol cans from there.
Okay.
But if you've got a can that has something in it, then that would become part of the household hazardous waste collection.
Okay,
So
So that needs
you would
to
just
go to
have
the
to make
trash.
sure that it's empty, yeah.
okay, oh, okay, okay.
I guess now would be appropriate time. Our last community trash pickup for the CCC is October the 5th. If anybody'd like to meet at the Jukebox Junction about 9 o'clock, we'll give you one of those safety vests and a trash bag, and we're going to pick up trash around the Bethel community. And that's our last scheduled pickup for the year.
Right.
So I just want to share that with my fellow commissioners. If they want to come out and join me on the 9 o'clock, if you come about 8, I might even buy you breakfast. So we will be picking up trash the
Yeah.
5th day of October, 9 o'clock on Saturday morning.
Appreciate
And-
you doing that, Tommy.
And got a reminder. As far as the educational, he mentioned the schools and everything. Because we do have contracted workers at our convenience centers, we are going to push an educational component with them as well, just to get them back into the, just don't throw it out. We're just going to throw everything away, because that's not the message that the county wants to send. So our contractors are going to get that same educational component as we would push for the schools and the community.
I just noticed on this some things that I don't know that I was aware of, because generally they're marked with the recycling symbol, but this is saying they don't want those things.
Correct.
I mean, basically, you can't put Solo cups. We don't recycle Solo cups. We don't recycle Starbucks
No,
paper cups,
Right.
straws, or
Correct.
any kind of lid, it looks like.
no lids. If they say if it can screw on, like a soda bottle, then it's okay to leave the lid on. If it's a flip top, like your dairy tub or your butter tub, that top is going to come off, and it's actually going to get sorted to paper because it's flat. so it becomes a contaminant to the paper. So that's why they say no lids on those. If it flips off, they're going to want you to throw that away to avoid that contamination of the paper.
And it says, please recycle only clean pizza boxes. Is there such a thing as a clean pizza box?
There is actually, if you look at the pizza box, the lid is perforated. If you don't have any grease on the top, you can actually tear it at the perforation and actually recycle the
Okay.
top, discard the bottom.
Well, that's why you're the head of recycling it.
Some of them's got a corrugated piece in the bottom of them as well that you could toss out if it don't
Right.
contaminate the
Yeah,
bottoms.
if there's some places that do that, some will put paper in the bottom. Just depends on how greasy that pizza really is.
I eat a lot of pizza.
We're going to put this on a website.
Yes, all
I
the
don't know how many people
information.
look at the Haywood County website, but
Right.
we'll have this on the Haywood County website so you can
Yeah.
look at it about what to put in and what not to put in. I was
Correct.
educated today. There's some of these items that are,
Right, and I've
that I
actually
put in
got
there.
meetings set up with a homeowners association coming up. There's a showing of a movie, I think that's Saturday at the Lake Junaluska that will be giving information to that group as well. So we're going to disseminate this information as much as we can, get it out there. Website's going to get updated, and just go to as many places as I can to get it out there.
Zondra, I'm sure that the convenience center workers, are they educated on this as well?
They will be. This is new information that this campaign actually just started last week. So I don't have that information to them yet. We are setting up a meeting with the contractor and the employees to get this information to them. And then I will be visiting the sites over the next couple of weeks to make sure that they're following the protocol of what's on the list.
Okay. So I've learned I can't put my receipts in there, and I've been doing that.
Right. Well,
So-
it's because the
I see
the
that,
heat,
yeah.
it's actually the heat, it's the thermal paper. It actually has chemicals in it that are bad for the paper. So it's that chemical compound that's what makes your receipts not recyclable.
Okay. And then lids. Now, what about lid on a juice? Would that?
If it screws on, and it will stay put if you screw it on, then you can leave it on. But if it's a flip-off top, like the milk jugs that flip off,
Yeah.
they want you to take those off because that would sort to the paper.
Because it does what?
It sorts to the paper, or if
Oh,
it's
okay.
small enough, it'll actually sort to the glass.
Oh, okay.
It'll fall into the glass and contaminate the glass.
Okay.
Yeah, and he did want me to mention that the cartons, we do have cartons listed on there as a recyclable commodity. There is
Right,
a,
egg cartons that are
yeah,
paper.
our
Yeah.
processor does have a contract with a company that would actually takes those cartons back.
Okay.
And that screw-on lid's fine to leave on there as well.
Okay. Okay, this is
paper egg
great.
cartons. Paper egg cartons, not the styrofoam ones.
No styrofoam,
Just the paper egg cartons.
yes.
Paper cups?
No paper cups.
Paper egg cartons.
Oh, yeah. Paper
No,
egg cartons.
no cups.
Right.
But
No cups
No
of any
cups
type.
whatsoever?
No.
Okay. I've been doing those too.
Yeah. A lot of them are number ones if you've got a plastic, and that's not what they want anymore.
Okay. Well, now we know. Okay. All right, well, thank you all. I want to give another shout out to Zondra. She's worked in tax, she works in building inspections, and she works in solid waste. So she wears a lot of hats, and we really appreciate you, Zondra. And she's been everywhere she's worked, she's done a great job, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody, anything else? Okay, all right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll go to the consent agenda since I missed that, or jumped to it. The first item is the request approval of the September 3rd, 2019 regular meeting minutes. The second item is to request approval of a resolution in support of funding to meet the mental health, intellectual development disabilities, and substance use disorder service needs of the citizens of Haywood County. That's under attachment 1. Next, item is number 3, is to request approval of a placement of a building control system for the HVAC system at the Justice Center by Train USA Incorporated for an estimate of $34,500 to be paid from budgeted funds. and that's attachment number 2. And the other night, Mark and I were at a meeting. I just want to add this. We were at a get-together, and Judge Christina Earwood was there, and she said it was 94 degrees in her, or 90 degrees in her courtroom because of this item. And the Justice Center is 15 years old, believe it or not. It is paid for, too. And it's, actually, it's 18 years old, I believe. So anyway, it's paid for, but we're having, this item is it's a motherboard, if you will, right, Chris? And so that's what we're replacing, and so hopefully it will keep the other parts of the HVAC working correctly, and we won't have that problem anymore. So anyway, she was very much in favor of this. Okay, the fourth item is the approval of a budget amendment from the General Fund, HHSA Health Department, $17,000 for additional state funding from the North Carolina Division of Public Health to expand the implementation of the mitigation to the opioid crisis programs, and that's under attachment 3. Okay, and that's all of the consent agenda. So does anyone have any questions of the consent agenda at this time?
I don't have any questions, but I highly support number 3, so judges will not call me to the courthouse anymore and tell me that I need to do something about the heat or the air.
Okay.
But just to note, that is coming out of budgeted funds,
Yeah,
too. So.
yeah, that's true. And Christina said that when people come to court, they're already kind of upset and mad, and this really makes them a lot madder. So she would really appreciate this. So
Yeah.
a lot of people aren't very upset. So okay, so I'll entertain a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
So moved. I make the motion.
Okay,
Second.
second, Brian. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Okay. Our next order of business is our regular agenda, and the first item of business is to request consideration of an occupancy tax penalty waiver request from Smoky Mountain Retreat in the amount of $392.59. We have our TDA Executive Director, Lynn Collins, here, and that's under attachment 4. Hi, Lynn.
Good evening. We had a request from Mr. Johnson with Smoky Mountain Retreat, and that was to request a penalty waiver in the amount of $392.59. The payment was admittedly 7 days late. It is due on the 20th of the month following the sales. As you know, we have a policy in place where the TDA board is authorized to make decisions on penalty waivers up to $200, and anything over $200 comes to the commissioners with a recommendation from the TDA board. And the TDA board is recommending denial of the penalty waiver request just due to the fact that it was admittedly paid 7 days late.
Okay. See, Kirk, you're on that board, right?
Yeah, we discussed this at the board meeting the other day, and I'm reading this again, and of course, sometimes at the board meetings, it moves along pretty quickly. You better speak up if you want to get in there. But have we previously waived for first time, and I just recall this as something that we've waived if you have never failed to comply before.
If you have never had a penalty waiver previously and you have a good excuse, then normally it would be waived. But there really was no excuse presented.
Okay.
So he has not had one previously, and so.
But it is coupled with those
Yes,
two
there's
things.
two
We've
different
always
accounts.
required that.
One's, yes, and it's two different penalties. If you don't file, you get a 5% penalty. It's 5% of the amount of tax. And then if you don't pay, that's a penalty equal to 10% of the tax. So it's a 15% basic penalty. And that is, and he did, he thought that was excessive. But I did explain to him that it is part of the legislation and part of the North Carolina sales tax guidelines as well. So, I mean, this is not something that the TDA board has any control over. I mean, they don't set the penalties or anything. It's through, same as North Carolina sales tax penalties.
So how did you figure out he was late? Did he call you and tell you he forgot, or did you have to call him and say?
No, it just came in late.
Okay.
It
So
came
you went
into the
ahead and mailed
finance
it.
office late, and she sent, a notice out that, showing the penalty. She does that, Vicki does that every month. If we get payments in late, she sends a statement showing the penalty that's due. And so he then contacted me to file a penalty waiver request.
On that waiver request, Lynn, does it have a space on there for the excuse or why it was late?
Yes, it does.
And he left it blank, is that correct?
No, I think you should have that attachment in with your agenda item.
No.
No, it's not? Okay. Well, I have
see
it
it.
here, and it says, his reason for penalty waiver request says the report was mailed 7 days late. It included the amount due. This is the first time in 25 years I've ever been late. The amount seems excessive for this situation.
I seen that, I'm sorry, but I thought that was the board's comments and not.
Nope, that was his.
Okay.
He said, and he did say that he questions the amount that was, if the calculation was correct. And I did go back and check with the finance office, and it was correct.
Was your board unanimous in deciding that you recommend us not grant this waiver?
Yes. It was the finance committee, actually, that made the recommendation, the finance committee of the TDA board. And then they did present it to the board.
So what's an acceptable reason? We've done this a couple of times since I've been here. What's an acceptable reason for somebody to be late?
We have had homeowners who maybe have had to go take care of their homes in Florida if there was a hurricane or something, and so they didn't get back in time to file it on time. Or it could be an illness or death in the family or something of that nature. I mean, they usually have, for it to be waived, there's usually a pretty good excuse. If somebody has set up a new account and they didn't realize the exact timeline and they were late trying to get their paperwork filed the very first time because they didn't understand the process. Sometimes they say they don't realize that it's monthly, they thought it was quarterly, or if they're from out of state, a lot of times they're not familiar with the North Carolina laws.
Well, I think it's pretty commendable that he actually just said, hey, I forgot. It's the first time I've done it.
Has he really been filing has he really been filing occupancy tax for 25 years?
Yeah.
I mean, I know Mr. Johnson pretty well. Matter of fact, I was going to ask Frank if I could abstain from it because he's a client of mine, and I knew he would say no.
Well, and you have to remember
for
the
that.
occupancy tax has been in existence now for 34, 35
Right.
years. So.
Right. In the finance committee, were they pretty adamant about this, or is just something that they couldn't waive and felt like the excuse wasn't that good?
Well, you have to remember those folks are accommodations owners.
Right.
And so, I mean, they're sitting there looking at it and said, well, would you let me
Yeah,
get by
they're
with
paying
it if I
theirs.
just didn't pay it late? What if everybody did that? What if all the accounts did that? They just turn, you have a set deadline that it's supposed to be in, and if everybody did that, then we would have some major problems. And Julie, you may have something to add to that since you were part of the discussion.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, I know he's
I think it's probably not an easy decision one way or the other to be able to do it. But honesty goes a long way. And I don't know if we need to stay on it very much longer, but I'd make a motion that we waive it on the fact that he actually did say, I was late. I messed up. First time in 25 years. So I don't know how you want to make that into a motion, but I'd like to make a motion that we
Sounded like
waive it.
it was.
Do what?
Sounded like it was.
That was a
Okay, well,
motion.
Candy can make it sound a lot better, but
Okay, as the motion, and do we have a second before we discuss any?
And the board, the TDA board does have a policy that you get one waiver. So it better be a
Yeah,
good excuse.
I like the fact that I'm going to go ahead and discuss it. I like the fact that he's paid it on time for 25 years, and I can do grace for one time, but that would be it, even though he doesn't have a good reason. But I mean, it's a tough call.
It is.
I'm not supposed to second it, but, and I won't, but since the chairman usually doesn't, but
I think you can second it.
well, I can.
I
Can
thought he could second it. Can he not second it?
Okay, well. if
I
you
think I've made the motion before as a chairman. Like, we might have to look at the records. I might not
Well,
have passed
I'll
correctly.
second it because I want to offer him a little bit of grace, even though I know that I don't, it's a tough decision because I don't like to go against your board. But if I did something for 25 years and I made one mistake and somebody couldn't give me a little bit of grace, I think the mitigating, even though he wasn't sick or going to Florida or whatever, under duress, I think as we get older, we forget things. I know I do, but I think I could offer some grace one time if he's done it for 25 years, and I want him to feel good about paying his. I don't want him to try to skip out on us either. I think sometimes we make people angry when we are too heavy-handed and stuff. So, but anyway.
I guess the only other thing I'd add to that, do we know how many times this similar situations happened in the past and we've not waived it? Do you have any idea, Lynn? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I honestly don't recall too many times that somebody's actually admitted it's just late. They always have some excuse.
Yeah, usually, and sometimes the excuses aren't real good. So.
Well, I guess I'm just worried that somebody's going to come forward next week and say, I've paid mine for 20 years and never been late, you know.
Well, I might waive it for 20 years. I mean,
Well, we certainly might be
10
setting.
years is a long time.
We certainly might be setting some type of policy that if they have had a good history of paying and they're late, that we might be waiving that. But on that, I'm okay. I'm gonna be in trouble. It doesn't matter how this thing goes. I got to go back to the TDA board and show up at the meeting, or I've got to see Mr. Johnson. So
You're in a tough spot. Either way.
and there's been a motion and a second. So
You got anything to say, Tom?
but I'm okay with it.
I'm not going to beat this horse anymore. Y'all done good.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, okay. Anyone opposed? Okay. I thought it was going to be 2-3.
I was trying to convince myself. But.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. But 25 years is long. That's a silver anniversary. So we'll tell him that's his silver anniversary gift.
I'll be sure
Mr.
to put
Johnson
that
has
in the letter.
contributed a lot of occupancy
has.
tax to the county over the years, and so.
He's got some nice rentals too.
Yeah,
and stuff.
they do.
And he's probably contributed to the economy because a lot of those folks that come and stay here. You know, they come back and buy homes, and I know
Absolutely.
they do because I do
Yes.
surveys for them, and Kirk does closings.
Tell the TDA board we take all the responsibility of this, that we,
I will.
I think they did what they had to do, or they should have done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Okay, thank you all. I lost my place. Okay, the second item of the regular agenda is to request approval of the August 2019 refunds, releases, amendments, and discoveries. And our tax assessor is not here tonight, but so Stephanie, our tax administrator, is pinch hitting for. So Stephanie,
Good
go
evening,
ahead.
Commissioners. I'm requesting the approval of the August 2019 refunds, releases, amendments, and discoveries.
Okay, does anybody have any questions or anything about that? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the refunds, releases, amendments, and discoveries
So moved.
for August 2019.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie. Okay, the next item of business is number 3 is the request approval of the August 2019 tax collections, updates, refunds, and refunds. We have our tax collector, Greg West, here, and that's under attachment 6. Welcome,
Good
Greg.
evening, Commissioners. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to request approval of the 2019 August tax collections, updates, and refunds. I'll give you some information on the updates. We have real property still due as of August 31st, 2019, $640,425.81, for a total over the last 9 years, $1,432,183.66. We collected $443,048 in the month of August, and we are currently collecting on the 2019 taxes. We've collected right at $3 million so far this year in the 2019. I wanted to let you know that our levy increased $462,000 from last year. The levy is now $40,053,658. So we were off to a good start. We got the bills out on time, and things are going okay. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Greg?
No, again, as I said earlier, Greg answered a couple of questions for a couple of constituents this week, and probably apparently the problem had been there for years. So I think he's very happy to have some service on that.
Yeah, we changed the address in there for him on the one that you had, and we're going to work with the Mountaineer on how the names get listed in the paper, where there's 3 Terry L. Joneses. There's no way to distinguish those except parcel ID numbers, so we're going to try to get full name listed.
What he's referencing, there's a guy, I'm acquainted with. He's an upstanding citizen in the community, does a lot of volunteer work, and there's actually 3 people in the county with his same name and middle initial, and apparently with the character limitations with the newspaper, they only print the middle initial. Right. And this guy volunteers and handles money, and it was there was another person with his same name that kept showing up on a delinquent tax report, so it reflected bad on him. He's continued having to ask questions, and it pretty much defamed his character indirectly. So hopefully we can get that corrected, because this guy's really he, like I say, he volunteers and handles money, and right. He's continued embarrassed every year because apparently another guy doesn't pay his taxes. So it's a genuine concern.
Sure.
And Greg, I appreciate you calling people back when they call you.
Absolutely.
That hadn't always been done, and I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Okay, I need a motion, I guess.
Don't have too much fun over it.
Okay. Anybody have any? Okay, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the August 2019 tax collections updates and refunds.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all those indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 4 is the request approval of application for a new wireless telecommunications facility on Jones Cove Road. We have our Development and Facilities Director, Chris Boyd, here, and that's under Attachment 7.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. The county received an application for a wireless telecommunication facility in the Jones Cove area from Verizon Wireless. Last month, the public hearing was held here. Subsequent to the public hearing, I had the opportunity to meet with a couple of residents of the neighborhood who shared some specific written concerns, and I think that Mr. Queen has prepared answers to that.
Received a memo from Case Brown, who is in the area of where this tower site is proposed to be. To get you oriented about where the tower site is, it's in the we use the phrase Poison Cove for all the paperwork on this. I think of it, I don't know, personally, I think of it as being more above Jones Cove Road is what I think of it as being, but I think of Poison Cove as being on the other side of the ridge, but that's just me. It's called the Poison Cove site. There were 5 specific concerns listed by Mr. Brown in his memo, and I've evaluated all of those and have this report about that. The question, the first question raised by Mr. Brown was whether or not there was a substantial evidence in the record for the need for the site, for the tower site. obviously our ordinance requires us to be able to show that putting up a cell tower is necessary in the judgment of the applicant and of the county in granting a permit to build it. The applicant provided a map. It's a colored map that shows the signal strength in decibels, technically, for the existing cell towers and cell tower strength in this area. And then they have a second map that shows a prediction of cell tower strength or signal strength in the area after the erection of the tower. And that chart is color-coded using a range of decibels for the signal strength, and it shows that there is an area right near it and below it, I guess technically, that has a weakness in cell radio coverage. A cell tower is just a radio transmitter and receiver. Your cell phone is just a radio, and the strength that's coming down from it is increased by putting a tower in that region. And in fact, we know from doing county business that in fact there is a need for additional signal strength in that exact neighborhood. We have just constructed an animal shelter that sits within 1,000 feet of this, and that in that animal shelter we had terrible cell service until one of our technician people put in a booster for the cell service inside the building itself. Okay, so the conclusion that I came to, and I've submitted this in a memo to the board, is that the applicant has presented sufficient evidence or substantial evidence of the need for increased signal coverage in that area, and that the application meets that requirement. The second item is a technical one. It relates to the notice to the affected property owners. There's two kinds of notices that have to go out. It's the same notice. It's a notice of the public hearing. Okay, it's a notice of the public hearing, which was originally held at whenever it was last meeting.
This location 1 month ago in August.
A month ago in August, we had a public hearing for it. Then the Cellco guy came and made his presentation. All this stuff was in pictures and all that. There's a requirement in our ordinance of two kinds of notice. One is a notice to every adjoining or abutting property owner. Adjoining or abutting property owner. That's the exact language of the ordinance. And for everybody who's an adjoining or abutting property owner, you're required to send the applicant, that is Cellco, is required to send them a notice of the public hearing by certified mail. Okay? They identified 21 property owners as being adjoining or abutting property owners, and they have sent us a certification that they sent certified mail to all those 21 property owners. The second kind of group that gets a notice is people who are so-called affected owners. This is anyone else besides that first group that is within a 1/4 mile radius of the site. And they identified half a dozen other property owners that those folks, they're not adjoiners or abutters, but they're within a 1/4 mile. They get just a regular U.S. mail service of the same notice, the notice of the public hearing. Okay? So, reviewing their data and reviewing their application, there is a question about notice being given to persons who own property on the west side of Jones Cove Road. Okay? A quarter of a mile is 1,320 feet. Yeah, 1,320 feet is a quarter of a mile. Jones Cove Road is about 1,300 feet from this cell site, going horizontally using the GPS data of the county by me on using our cell site measuring tool. So probably on the west side of Jones Cove Road is an owner, one Merle Brown, 941 Jones Cove Road, that is an owner that's both an adjoiner or a butter because he adjoins, separated only by Jones Cove Road, this building site, the site of the property. And he's also probably within the quarter mile, okay? Very close call. Our ordinance doesn't define what adjoining or abutting is. I've done some legal research. Their terms are used interchangeably. I've evaluated it and concluded that because they used both words, that they meant something with each of those words. And my interpretation is that abutting means that the property owner has to touch the site ownership, okay? It has to touch the property where the site's going to be. Adjoining, I've interpreted to mean that could be adjoining but not touching because there's an intervening state road, in this case Jones Cove Road itself. This is a question of interpretation of our own ordinance that doesn't have a definition of what adjoining or abutting means, but if you give meaning to both of those words and you give them some kind of rational meaning, that's one interpretation. It's mine. In any case, it looks to me like that we've probably got a situation where Mr. Merle Brown probably did not get a notice that he should have gotten that this public hearing was going to be held. Now, having said that, Mr. Merle Brown was in fact, I'm told by people who know him, in fact present at the public hearing which was held last month. So regardless of whether he actually got a certified mail or a U.S. mail or he simply was aware of it and in any case, he came to the actual public hearing. So the issue is that it's possible that there was not a complete compliance with the ordinance by him not getting the U.S. mail or the certified U.S. mail notice of the hearing. He, in fact, attended the hearing, I'm told, by people who know him and who were at this hearing. But that is a question mark, okay? There were two other issues raised by Mr. Case Brown in his memorandum. One of them was whether or not the site was located on a protected mountain ridge, and my conclusion is it clearly is not on a protected mountain ridge. Protected mountain ridge is a defined term. It means a ridge that is more than 3,000 feet in elevation and is more than 500 feet above the adjacent valley floor. This site is at 2,801 feet. That's shown by their topographic information on the site application, and therefore it does not meet the definition of a protected mountain ridge. Protected mountain ridge is a highly defined and highly regulated thing in county government. We don't do much of it anymore, but it's a big deal if you're covered by it. And so therefore my conclusion is that this is not on a protected mountain ridge, and that has no applicability to the application. Finally, I'm sorry, not finally, there's two more. There's three more. There was a complaint, or there was a statement made in Mr. Brown's memorandum that recited what's called the public property preference. Our ordinance says that an applicant for a cell tower has to give consideration. They have to consider properties owned by Haywood County or its instrumentalities in siting a new cell tower. In this case, the application recites the ownership of public property in the neighborhood, and that they considered it. The conclusion that the applicant came to, which a conclusion with which I agree, is that the only area which would be considered owned by the county or its instrumentalities is actually our new animal shelter. But it's within the ETJ of Clyde, and Clyde prohibits cell phone towers except in 2 locations in the town of Clyde or its ETJ, and this is not one of them. Therefore, this site could not be approved for a cell tower. And in any case, our ordinance does not require them to use a Haywood County site. It merely requires them to consider a site. And they've done that. It's obviously done it in their application. They made it quite clear. They've also made it quite clear why they didn't pursue citing it on the animal shelter site. Now, I'll also say to you, without nobody asked me, but I'll tell you, the animal shelter site is several hundred feet lower in elevation below the site that they've requested. Higher is better when it comes to a cell phone site, and therefore they have met the requirements of the ordinance. They've considered a Haywood County site. It's not suitable because it's in the Clyde ETJ and can't in fact be built upon. Finally, there are 2 other items that I think could be quickly dealt with. One is the applicant, or Mr. Brown, has made a statement that putting the site in its proposed location would invoke a federal ordinance, a federal regulation on the modification of existing towers. And this is not an application for a modification of existing towers, so that doesn't apply. It simply doesn't apply. Finally, Mr. Brown has made a request for and a statement that the county needs to hire an outside consultant to evaluate the application, and we should take that opportunity to hire an outside consultant to review the data that's been presented by the applicant. That's a judgment for this board, but my conclusion is that the board is certainly not required to engage an outside consultant, and in fact, the evaluation of this application was fairly easily done by Chris with his experience in the ordinance, and by me, and just full disclosure. This ordinance was passed in 1980.
98.
90. When?
Late 90s.
When?
The late 90s.
In the late 90s. And Chris and I both had a substantial hand in the drafting and revision and the public hearings that led to the development of this ordinance. Chris was representing the county. I was representing some cell phone developers at the time. And so we've been at this hammer and tong on when it was developed, when the ordinance was originally drafted. And Chris has administered the ordinance ever since it was drafted. And so I didn't see any reason at all to have an outside consultant tell us more about our ordinance. That we knew more about our ordinance than anybody else does. So in any case, you have that ability to engage an outside consultant, but I didn't see any reason for it. And that's my conclusion and response to the memorandum that was filed by Mr. Case Brown. The conclusion, the overall conclusion of that is that, in my opinion, you have a choice as to whether or not the public hearing, which was held without notice to Mr. Merrill Brown, in spite of his presence at the public hearing, could be considered what's called substantial compliance with the ordinance. If you have substantial compliance with the ordinance, you can proceed, even though there's some small technical defect in the process. But you can also renotice the hearing. If you renotice the hearing, you would resend the notices to the affected property owners, and this time include the owner who did not get the notice originally. and you'd have a new public hearing, and then you could consider the application after that, what I'd call a replacement public hearing, if that's the direction you wanted to go. And I'm ready to answer any questions that anybody has about that or my process.
Well, and I'll just make this comment. I mean, the Browns, I've known the Browns for quite some time. I was their next door neighbor for 10, 12 years. And so they had sent this request from me. Their concerns initially when they first found out that a cell tower might come in the area. Matter of fact, I think it's been over a year or so ago that I had probably sent you the email in that regards, Chris. And at that point in time, I think there was just talk about it, and I don't even think they'd submitted anything to the county. And I felt like that these points that were brought up, I mean, in the 17 years I've been here, I have yet to have someone bring up this finite and this type of position as to the cell tower, so that warranted some type of response to it. And I appreciate you, Frank, preparing that. But I thought it was good questions that I had not thought about in the past. I did say generally that also in the past that I've seen that we've had discussions about cell towers, but eventually, because of the rules and regulations, they end up passing. The reason we started the meeting late, that I did speak with the Browns outside and indicated the particular issues and the fact of the issue of notice. And the Browns, very supportive Haywood County citizens, indicated that they certainly did not want to let the notification hold up a process that was going to take place anyway. So I don't think the notice factor is a concern to the Browns. I can't take away that the rest of these issues may not be a concern to them, but they do understand the process. And I've also explained to them, like I would anybody and have in the past. I've never taken this position as a position to tell people what they can do with their property as long as it falls within the parameters of the state laws, and they're not committing a crime, and of course it doesn't violate any kind of ordinance. And generally we have found with these cell towers that they're usually in compliance, and that we pass the cell towers, and there's certainly folks that don't necessarily like them because of their appearance, but they serve as a necessity to some people, and especially at least the way that technology is forming, they're becoming more and more important to high-speed internet and things like that. So at any rate, I have spoken with them, and they are in attendance and are aware of that issue of notice, and are prepared for the board to move forward with the decision on the cell tower.
Okay, and I appreciate the questions too. That's probably some of the most in-depth questions that we've ever gotten on a cell phone tower. That pertained to exactly what, that could be. And then also I know the Browns, and I just want to say that they keep their property up. They've got a piece of property near where I live, and every time I go by there, it's like, they don't live there, but they keep the property up. It's not a grown-up mess or anything. So they really take good care of their property, and I know they're concerned about this.
Now, also, and this may be personal, they may not want me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's several acres that they own there in Jones Cove, and it's a very a desirable part of Haywood County. It would be very desirable for developers, but they have made a decision not to do that, a conscious decision not to do that and to preserve that area. And so that's another reason probably for their position on this.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And I will say to this tower does increase the area around the community college, and most importantly, the hospital. When you look at the two maps, there's a lot of red areas, which is not very good. That's really low strength. That turn green and yellow, which are good strengths, and that'll really help. I think, like Kirk was talking, everything's technology driven anymore, and even our iPads, we got internet. We've got wireless access off of Verizon towers for our iPads and for our phones, and I know doctors there's a weakness right there around the hospital, and this will really help them to make sure their devices are accessed around the hospital and the community college. That may not be a good thing, but, people need to be, well, it probably is, because if you're in the classroom, you might need to access technology to get your reports and things. So I think it'll be good for that. Okay, so does anybody have anything?
I've got one question. Did Verizon voluntarily go with the camouflage pole, or was that a request, or did they just voluntarily do that for aesthetic reasons on their own?
It's not a requirement of the ordinance. They could have made an application to install a tower without any type of stealth technology. They provided that in their application without any request from the county.
I mean, I understand they're quite a bit more expensive to the person that owns the tower and puts it up to make one like that. That's what I understand. But I did drive by the one you referenced in the last meeting, and you really kind of have to look hard if you didn't know it was there. I mean, you really would think it was just a big pine tree sticking up over there. It's down below Lake Junaluska.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, another comment too from the pictures, I guess, is this what it's actually going to look like? Is that correct, Chris? The reason I'm asking that is it's not too high above the tree line, so in the fall you're probably going to be able to see it more than in the summer, but it's not that visible.
The photo simulations were provided as part of the application from Verizon. Those are not something we produced at the county level. So it will be visible, no doubt, from some location and from someone's point of view. There's no way to conceal it totally. If you were able to conceal it totally, it would not function.
Sure. Okay. Anybody have any other comments? Okay. Okay, well, at this time, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the application for a new wireless telecommunications facility on Jones Cove Road.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Yeah,
I just want to thank everybody's for being here, and I'd like to think that this is a process that we can be proud of in our government, as opposed to other countries, that people do have the opportunity to come speak and voice their opinions and their concerns. I think this is something that I've got to vote for, simply because, if you follow our ordinance and you follow the things that were supposed to be done, they're supposed to be done. In regards to the notice, if we were dealing with the notice, I would say no. We need to push it off to the next meeting. But I'm just glad that I live in a place that we can actually do this. I'm sorry that you're going to have the tower to look at, but I've been sorry for several people that have been here in the past before. So,
any other comment? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, Chris. Okay, our next item of business is number 5, is to request approval of a reimbursement resolution, which is a resolution declaring the intent of the County of Haywood, North Carolina, to reimburse itself for the capital expenditures insured in connection with public safety projects from the proceeds of tax-exempt obligations. And we have our Finance Director, Julie Davis.
Good evening. You'll remember when we were discussing the 2020 budget that the sheriff had requested a capital project for a radio tower and equipment and land purchase or lease that was going to be a little bit over $1 million. And we decided during the budget, instead of putting the capital project into the budget, that we would borrow the money for that project, so we put the debt service into the budget. And this reimbursement resolution is one of the legal formalities that we need to bring to you to have you approve, because we are probably going to have to purchase some of that capital before we borrow the money. I won't read the whole thing, but and you've read the title, but just some of the high spots here. Whereas the Board of Commissioners of the County of Haywood has determined that it is in the best interest of the county to proceed with certain public safety projects, including the acquisition of radio equipment and a communications tower with radio equipment. And whereas the county presently intends at one time or from time to time to finance all or a portion of the cost of the projects with proceeds of tax-exempt obligations and reasonably expects to cause to execute and deliver tax-exempt obligations to finance or to reimburse itself for all of or a portion of the costs of the project. And whereas the county desires to proceed with some of the projects and will incur and pay certain expenditures in connection with the projects prior to the date of the execution and delivery of the obligations, such original expenditures to be paid for originally from a source other than proceeds of the obligations, and the county intends and reasonably expects to be reimbursed for such original expenditures from a portion of the proceeds of the obligations to be executed and delivered at a date occurring after the date of such expenditures. And all that means is we're going to borrow the money at some point this year once we have a complete project. And when we do, we're going to reimburse ourselves for some of the costs that we want to incur currently. And you'll remember the last meeting, the sheriff brought to you about $690,000 worth of radio equipment that they felt like they needed to go ahead and purchase in order to keep their communications going throughout the county. So that's what this reimbursement resolution is for.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the request of the reimbursement resolution declaring the intent of Haywood County to reimburse itself for capital expenditures incurred in connection with public safety projects from the proceeds of tax-exempt obligations.
So moved.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, we heard the presentation last time on this. Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay, is anyone opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Okay, the next, and Julie's up again, is to request approval of a budget amendment, which is a capital project fund, the county building projects construction of $695,000 to appropriate the amount needed to purchase radio equipment in order for EOC 911 to have better safety communications and to reduce response times across the county as presented in the previous board meeting, and that's under attachment 9. Okay, Julie.
And this budget amendment is to actually put the cost of that equipment into the budget instead of putting the entire project, because we don't have the entire project yet. We're going to take the piece that we do have, this equipment, and we're going to appropriate fund balance from general fund and transfer it to a capital project fund to fund just this portion.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? We kind of did that last time. Okay. Okay, I'll entertain a motion that we approve the budget amendment for the capital project fund, county building projects construction of $695,000 to appropriate the amount needed to purchase radio equipment in order for the EOC 911 to have better safety communications and to reduce response times across the county as presented at the previous board meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Julie. Okay. The seventh item of our regular agenda is to request approval for authorization for the county manager to participate in planning for a location and or facility to house educational support services. We go ahead, Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we heard a presentation a couple of meetings ago from the school system about their educational support center. At that time, you requested that Chris and Julie and I meet with school staff. We've met a couple of times. The school board last week passed a formal resolution asking school staff to work with county staff in a way that we can maybe start talking to realtors and things like that to look at parcels or to maybe engage the LGC about debt financing and things like that. So this is just a formal approval for me and staff to work on the project with the school system.
Okay. So we need to vote on that. Okay. Does anybody have any questions?
I've had a few people ask, did we ever hear from Landmark? Did they officially sign off on taking the old hospital? I think it never got publicized.
They did, yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, because that was a formality that had to be done. So, yeah, good question. Okay. Is there any other comments or anything? No? Okay. I'll entertain a motion that we request approval of authorization for county manager to participate in the planning for a location and/or facility to house the educational support services.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Okay. The next order of business is appointments, and the only item we have on that is the request appointment of Beverly Beeson to the Southwest Commission Regional Advisory Board. It's under attachment 11.
Ms. Beeson is retired. She's lived in Waynesville for about 10 years. She wants to be an advocate for increasing funding for senior centers, as well as improved conditions at nursing homes and long-term care facilities.
Okay. Okay, I'll entertain a motion that we appoint Beverly Beeson to the Southwestern Commission Regional Advisory Board.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And I will say we appreciate our citizens participating in these boards. Sometimes they're hard to get applicants for, and we appreciate her willing to do this. So all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay. Thank you. That's unanimous. Okay, our next order of business is a closed session, and we have none tonight. And
It's our business to adjourn.
that's right. Does anyone have any other business to bring before the board? Okay.
Just a comment, Kevin, we had our HHS annual meeting this past week, and well attended, I felt like, and had a lot of long-term employees that were awarded for their service. So, you kind of forget how many employees we do have as a county, and again, the ones that are long-term. So I'd like to say thank you to all those employees.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I actually went to Elk Fest, and I went after it rained, so there weren't as many people there after it rained, but they said they had a huge crowd. I mean, a big turnout. And after I left there, I came back into town, and we drove through town, and Waynesville was packed. So I'm amazed at the number of people, visitors and tourists and second home owners that we have here in Haywood County. I mean, this board certainly needs to prepare for future planning because of the growth that we're going to see. But I've just never seen it like that. I've been here my whole life, and I'm surprised at the number of people that are here.
You know, I went to Elk Fest as well Friday night and had an opportunity to sit with some people from Montana who actually were instrumental in bringing the first elk here to our area. And then there was another wildlife official from Land Between the Lakes in Kentucky came over. It was actually a very entertaining conversation. So, and it was a big event, a lot of people there. I enjoyed it.
Good. I want to recognize Luke Weir with the Mountaineer. Way there, Luke. Luke took over for Carter, who left the Mountaineer to go to Pennsylvania, I believe Vicki told me. So Luke's the new reporter for the Mountaineer, and he'll be reporting on us, so we better be nice to him, I guess. But I want y'all to, you might want to let Luke know what your mobile number is so he can get up with you. I did. And that way he can, if he calls you and you need to call him back, you'll have a number and everything. So welcome aboard there, Luke. So, and Luke said he was from Atlanta, so he's not Hotlanta. I hope you left that down there, right? Okay. Okay, is there anything else anybody has tonight? Okay, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Okay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.